a trail perspective. Because it's going to get used for guns.
Yeah.
So how do you make it safe?
This is the January
So how do
2022 issue. It's a little older. I
So
worked with this. And he has
Like some
10
of the
priorities,
people are
and I'm looking at 5 priorities.
Because if you go to trail, spend a lot of time go through it. You gotta get in there and work.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are gonna get upset. So I think some of the, you know, I don't want to say it's these rules about trail and how to put it, and then the last disclaimer is, if you gotta get a truck in there and it's off the trail.
Okay, so I think we're good. Yeah.
You know,
Older.
and
Are we
that's-
streaming?
yeah.
Yes, we are.
that's why you.
Right, because I need the power. It's just the, it's the April, April and the PowerPoint at the top there. Almost ready, guys. And we're streaming? Yes, we are good to go. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Donna, we're good to go. We're only missing Corey, and he will be running a little bit behind, but we have quorum. So take her away. Start us off.
Thank you, Emily. So let's call this meeting to order. It is 4:03 p.m. on Tuesday, April 4th. And I would like to share our land acknowledgement. And I acknowledge with respect that we are on the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, and that the land in which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and known as Bawatang. And Bawatang is the home of the Garden River First Nation, the Batchewana First Nation, and the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council. Our second item on our agenda is the, sorry, I'm flipping screens here. The adoption of our minutes from our last meeting. So could I have someone to move in second adoption of the minutes from our last meeting? I see Mark and I see Tobin. Thank you very much. Any questions, concerns, additions, deletions with regards to those minutes? All right, seeing none, all in favor of approval? And that looks like that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to, here we go. Anyone with the declaration of pecuniary interest today? That would be unlikely for today. So very good. Thank you. Moving on. Looking for adoption of today's agenda. Could I have someone to move and second the adoption of today's agenda? Thank you, Nairi and Eric. Any additions, deletions, questions about today's agenda?
Yeah, but if you want a copy, I have one.
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
I don't see any. Therefore, could I ask for a vote? All in favor of adoption of today's agenda? And that is carried. Thank you very much. My apologies that I am not there today. As many of you know, I'm a person who is very much likes in-person meetings for many reasons. However, I have competing agendas today, and for my own sanity, I decided that this was this afternoon, actually, that this was going to work best for me, and I appreciate you all being there, because it's a very important meeting today for us to talk about our priorities. And I'm going to ask Emily now, I believe, to take over this conversation. She's we've all been prepared with great documents, and I believe you and or Robin are going to be sharing the spreadsheets and other things, and we're going to work our way through understanding what all of you have contributed to what you think our priorities should be, and you think our initiatives should be, and the important things you think we should accomplish. And we're going to work our way through that. And then after today's meeting, we are going to have an opportunity to individually prioritize those things, and then we'll bring those results back and we'll make a plan. So Emily, take it away. Thank you.
Oh yeah, thanks, Donna. So I have a PowerPoint that's going to walk us through my plans for today. So I just want to bring that up here. Okay, so just for a little bit of context, I've had the opportunity to meet with every one of you to get some ideas, priorities, potential projects that this committee could try to push forward for 2023. So thank you for taking the time to meet with me one-on-one. I appreciate that. I've provided you all with some context regarding this committee, how it came to be. It's still quite young. It's only been around for a little over 2 years. So we're still, getting our footing, but we have an opportunity this year, in my opinion, to really come up with a good list and submit that to council. This Environmental Sustainability Committee, a committee of council, has 7 responsibilities for it, as outlined in its terms of reference. I'm going to go through these responsibilities today, provide you with a bit of background on the committee, and then one by one, we're going to go through each of the responsibilities and address how they are being addressed already, and focus in on the 3 responsibilities that this committee has as priority when it comes to creating a list of priorities for council consideration in advance of the budget. The second piece of today's meeting will be to go over the submission of ideas that you have all shared with me for priorities, but also projects. And I will talk about what we did last year for projects, just for some basics. Last year, our committee, actually it was in 2021 where we did this exercise. We came up with a bunch of ideas and we submitted those priorities to the planning department, who incorporated this into the review of the city's official plan. Last year, the committee came up with a series of projects. We prioritized the top 3. We created a working group and we worked towards their implementation. So these are within the constraints of this committee, and also giving you an opportunity to participate what we're going to try to do today. So as a reminder, a big part of this committee is to oversee the implementation of the city's community greenhouse gas reduction plan. As a reminder, we have a target of net zero by 2050, which will require a lot of effort from the corporation as well as the community. The city is taking a staged approach with a 10% corporate reduction target and 5% community by 2030. We recently updated our corporate emissions, and we are not on track to reaching this emissions reduction target. We've actually seen a 10% increase in our corporate emissions from 2017 to 2022. Hence, a more united and aggressive corporate financial commitment is required so we can meet these goals. Oops. As a reminder again, the purpose of our meeting today is to review the responsibilities of this committee and what's being done, but also we'll go over the feedback for projects and priorities for 2023 and discuss some next steps for implementation. When we finalize the options for project and priorities, so Donna had mentioned, today is kind of everybody's final soapbox moment. If there's anything else that's come to mind that you want to bring forward as a priority or a project, say it today. You'll be provided with an electronic ranking form a couple of weeks after this meeting, where you'll be asked to prioritize your top 5 priorities. We'll put them into categories, and your top 3 projects that this committee should pursue. When we come up with this final list of priorities, per the terms of reference for the responsibilities of this committee, we will submit those to council and senior management for their consideration to review in advance of the preparation of the 2024 budget. The ETA for this is June. As I said, this committee has 7 responsibilities. We've all been provided with these before when we had our first meeting in February. I'm going to go over all of them one by one. As I said earlier, there are 3 priorities that we are going to focus on today. The first is assisting, as a responsibility, this committee assists in formulating and recommending environmental and sustainability policies, plans, and practices, and making recommendations for continuous improvement. The second priority that we're going to be working on today is developing a list of priorities which support environmental sustainability for council consideration as part of the annual budget cycle. And also discuss how the committee can create and highlight opportunities for the general public to learn about and advocate for climate change mitigation in Sault Ste. Marie, as well as encouraging activities and outreach in environmental matters, specifically educational programs. In the chart that you've all been provided, there's the third column, which is in red, highlights some of the project ideas that actually address this educational opportunity as well. So that was really great to see. Okay, so diving in here into an overview of the responsibilities of the committee. Responsibility number 1 is to recommend project priorities and assist in the review and implementation of the community and corporate greenhouse gas reduction plan, including reporting on progress. This was completed for 2022, and corporate updates to our emissions review occur on a regular basis, annual basis rather. So in 2023, we'll have, in early 2024, we will have the results of our 2023 corporate emissions. The community emissions update is underway for this year. It will be based on 2022 data, and that will be available late 2023 or early 2024. Absolutely.
So talking about corporate emissions, I just want to understand what you mean by that.
Municipal operation.
So just city,
Yep.
the city's operation.
Yeah, so our operations, corporate facilities, buses, vehicles,
And how is the data? Emissions.
how is the emissions data collected? Okay, so the city is part of an organization called the Partners for Climate Protection Program. It has over 450 Canadian municipalities. We utilize their framework. I can share, probably for the best, if I share our emission inventory report with you, which explains in detail how everything was calculated, all of the data, etc.
And then the data that's calculated, that's how you're setting your targets, like how are you balancing the emissions that you're going to continue to produce?
So the data that's collected tells us where our emissions come from. The emissions reduction targets were created in I think they were created in 2020 when we were writing the greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan.
A target search or?
Emission reduction targets were created when we were developing the community greenhouse gas reduction plan in 2020. Targets were established from a variety of stakeholder engagement opportunities. We met with city staff, we met within the greater community. There were like open houses, ranking exercises, etc. And that's how those targets came to be. So 10% corporate in 10 years, so municipal operations, 5% community. Those are the preliminary goals, but we have a long-term goal of net zero by 2050.
And so how we balance your emissions?
How will we balance our, what do you mean? Like, how are we?
How are you going to get to net zero?
The GHG reduction plan has over 60 actions and it's broken down into 7 sectors on how we can get there. And a variety of initiatives are underway at the city and within the community to address reduction, but that's why we have to continue to measure our progress by reviewing our corporate emissions inventory data, like updating it on an annual basis. Are we making progress? Yes, no. We just completed that exercise at the end of 2022, which showed that we are not on track. We are not doing enough. It highlights what we've done, all of the retrofits, emission energy reduction retrofits that are underway, projects, etc. So more needs to be done.
And what are the consequences of not reaching these targets?
This plan was unanimously approved by City Council in December of 2020. So the city has committed to reaching these targets. There is no actual penalty, but the city has made a public commitment to reach these reduction targets.
But they're not moving them yet.
At present, we are not on, no.
Okay.
So one of the responsibilities of this committee / through my position is to update the inventory for municipal operations on an annual basis to see how are we doing, check in. And we're not doing good, so we need to do better. So some actions have been taken this year specifically to remediate that. In particular, we've added a section to city council reports where all projects that go to council are recommended to identify where they reduce emissions or if they address climate adaptation. That's just been rolled out. And we've also created a twice a year city senior management team where we are addressing what every department is doing.
And how are those measures developed? This new implementation plan?
These specific, as I call them, remedial actions, have been identified as good practices from other municipalities who are making more progress. Climate lens, for example, is something that you see a lot of municipalities adopt. But I can send you the climate plan and the inventory. Good to read if you haven't saw it. It's over 80 pages long.
Well, no, it's just good to understand. like,
Absolutely.
all that stuff, especially if you're not meeting the targets, like, not having any kind of actionable consequences seems like a little bit, it's the stuff like. the increase
Like
in-
there's no government mandate that says your municipality shall have X or result in X. But municipalities, corporate entities, they're all putting in commitments, both in human resources, operational changes, and financial investment to reach these goals. So a greater effort to do this needs to be done within this corporation. So,
Is it
forget,
okay to ask questions?
oh yeah, sorry, it's a lot.
I know
It's a lot to remember, and I'm hoping I'm getting it all out there for you. Okay, but I will action that as myself to send you the plan. Because it provides a really good context and overview, which would be useful for the whole minute, honestly. Okay, so responsibility number 1 is ongoing. Okay, again, for my role, updating this on an annual basis. Again, responsibility number 2 is quite similar, reporting on the city's progress regarding energy management, emissions reduction, and environmental initiatives within municipal operations. So last year, at the end of 2022, the city, through this position, completed its very first corporate update based on our new emission inventory methodology process that was created in 2020 or 2019. And within this report, not only did we identify our actual emissions, but we identified what is being done. What is the emissions reduction from our retrofits that we did in 2022, etc. Also, I'm pleased to announce that coming in the next month or so, we'll be reporting our very first annual sustainability report, which will go into greater detail on what the city has done, not only from an emissions reduction standpoint, but other environmental sustainability initiatives as well. So in sum, these responsibilities are being addressed. But this committee has an opportunity to comment, be aware of, and support.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
How do you define an environmental initiative?
again, the GHG reduction plan that was approved by council had 6 key actions broken down into 7 key sectors. So corporate, so municipal operations, buildings and energy, community buildings and energy, transportation, waste reduction, economic development, municipal leadership and green space. And those measures are being tracked on have they been started? Of the 60, have they started? Are they done? Are they in progress?
But we haven't seen those 16 yet, or we believe it.
They are in the GHG reduction plan, which was linked in the February orientation agenda package. I'm happy to send it out again.
No, right.
But the sustainability report, and because this is a committee of council, like anything that we do has to go to council first. After I go to council with the sustainability report, I'll bring it to this committee for review and discussion as well. And it goes through all 60 actions, very simply, green light done, yellow light in progress, red not started. So it's a nice overview of how do we do. Anything else? For now,
I'm just
keep
telling them.
keep asking, Andrew.
Yeah, well,
Keep asking.
Emily, if this would be okay, I'm really sorry I'm not there. So I believe it's a bit hard to see in the video, but I believe that's Andrew that's asking those questions. Is that you, Andrew?
yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Hope to meet you in person someday. Emily, maybe we can, I know you already said about getting Andrew some further information, but if it would be helpful that you and I, or you and Travis, or whoever would make sense, would meet with Andrew and just really dig into the information that he's asking, is certainly, very relevant, and so that he feels comfortable in terms of moving forward and us getting these initiatives in place that we're going to work on for 2023. So just thought I'd throw that in there. Thank you.
I'll do it. Watch for my email.
Cool.
Okay. So one of the third responsibility, which we'll be talking about today when we go through all the ideas that I've collected, is assist in formulating and recommending environmental and sustainability policies, plans, practices, and making recommendations for continuous improvement. The GHG reduction plan is done, but it's continuously evolving, and this committee has an opportunity to bring forward best practices, ideas that are being utilized within the sector or your own organization on how we can improve environmental sustainability here at the city. We'll be talking about that. That's column 1 in your handout in the green for some of the ideas that we've collected. Responsibility number 4, which we've already done quite a bit of for this year, is review and recommend funding applications to the Community Development Fund for environmental sustainability projects. So this is an ongoing responsibility. We currently accept applications from nonprofits and city departments to the city's Green Initiative Fund on a rolling intake throughout the year until the funds dry up, under the pillars of energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, water conservation, habitat restoration, waste reduction, and active transportation. A common theme in my one-on-ones with members of this committee was interest in reviewing and revising this application process, the priorities, and even ranking. So I have actually listed that as a project that this committee could focus on in column 3 of your handout for projects. We actually did this last year where we added priorities to, or rather buckets to the Green Fund for active transportation and waste reduction and habitat restoration, just to increase the opportunities for funding in the community. So how we could go about this, as I mentioned earlier, is creating like a working group who would get together and report back to the committee on, changes to that fund. So again, that is just one of the projects that you'll have the opportunity to rank, and we'll discuss more later on. So this is ongoing. Okay, so responsibility number 5, supporting local initiatives that promote environmental sustainability and conservation of the local natural environment and ecosystem. The city has quite a few involvement event plans for this year. I've listed some of them on the screen. We worked with community organizations on World Water Day. We have 2 events taking place. We have one in February, one coming up next week on energy incentives for commercial and industrial organizations, both electricity and natural gas. Science North is actually coming to town this month as well. They'll be hosting their Northern Ontario Youth Climate Summit, and the city will be participating in that. There's something coming down the pipes for City Nature Challenge, World Migratory Bird Day, Bike to Work Week, and Yellowfish Road. And there's an opportunity for others. So if you have ideas, reach out to me and, you know, see how we can support it, or if you're looking for your organization. I know in my one-on-ones with members of the group, we had a couple of ideas for projects that this committee could prioritize, to keep it in the back of your mind. So I would say that this responsibility is ongoing. Responsibility number 6, which again, I've spoken about a little bit already, is developing a list of priorities that support environmental sustainability for council consideration as part of the annual budget cycle. We have not yet done this as a committee. And so this will be very important. As I said, back in 2021, the committee came up with 4 priorities and a series of actions that they submitted to the city's planning department for incorporation into the city's official plan, which is the primary land use planning document for the municipality. And this was a really great exercise. This year, we're going to go to the top. And it will be useful because this municipality, as I said, is not on target, and we need to make some efforts from a policy, financial, and resource commitment to help meet those targets. So today is sort of step 1 at getting those ideas out there. The last priority, again, is creating and highlighting opportunities for the general public to learn about and advocate for climate change in Sault Ste. Marie. There was a really great initiative that this committee actually helped push forward last year. There was a webinar that was supported by the committee and the city's planning department on parking reform. It was very well attended, and these are the kind of ideas that we're looking for. So think about this if you haven't already suggested ideas for projects and go around. Stuff like that. How can we increase climate, education, climate change education within our, that would go under the 3rd pillar of this priority zone. So just for some context on what was submitted to the planning department back in 2021. As I said, there were 4 priority pillars identified by the committee with a series of actions. They were really good. They were really good. I recommend that, we take a look at these and we think, because some of the ideas that have come forward today could fall under some of these categories. So again, this was submitted to planning, but now we want to work on reviewing this and thinking about what we can submit to city council. I'm not going to go over all of this. You'll be able to, if you had it in your agenda package, but it's food for thought. Just high level, what like the first priority was planning and urban design. So looking at densification, looking at affordability, accessibility, active transportation, looking at things like parking reform, green space, forest management, and tree planting, looking at like, what do we have as opposed to just planting trees, being more methodical about what do we have, where are the gaps, how should we be planting, for example. Built environment, so looking at new builds that the city builds that are low emission or carbon neutral, using local energy sources, carbon storage, and investment. So committing to investing in studies, relevant studies to identify projects for renewable energy and energy efficiency. So again, these were submitted to the planning department. Really good summary. Okay, so that ends my kind of overview and context for what we're going to do next. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So as I said, there are 7 responsibilities of the committee. I have met with all of you individually to get an idea for those 2 pillars. So environmental and sustainability policies, but also priorities. I've done my best to categorize them. Consider this my straw dog, if you will. Definitely will finesse it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through them. We'll start with Colin Green and just work our way to the right. We only have a little under an hour, so this is going to be fairly fast paced. If there is something that is missed or something that you want to elaborate on after the meeting, please reach out to me. As I said, this is your opportunity to put forward any additional ideas, maybe clarify what you meant, probably can identify some of the tasks that you mentioned to me, and we'll go from there. So before we dive in, any questions, comments, concerns? Okay. So, responsibility 3, assist in formulating and recommending environmental and sustainability policies, plans, practices, and making recommendations for continuous improvement. So one of the first ideas that was put out there was establishing a corporate environmental social governance policy. This does not mean that we are actually going to do it, but it's going to be forming what we submit to council and senior management for consideration. Caveat. But these are all really great ideas, and you know, if anyone wants to elaborate that on that, they can. Currently, we do not have a policy that addresses ESG. This is something that you're seeing a lot of more in media, more mainstream best practices from other organizations. So again, it's a decent idea. Not seeing any comments, so we're going to move to that. We'll go for it.
So I think that would help address the greenhouse gas emissions target, the fact that we're not meeting them. Because ESGs could be like, you know, looking at property the city might own that's just gone to fallow, there's no trees on it, you know, maybe it was used in the past, but there's not to be for deforestation. So planting trees strategically to offset, so it'll be more of an offsetting mechanism. Not directly for carbon, like you would get money for a carbon offset, but it would be the city's policy to, you know, look for opportunities. I think like there's a number of other things that you could do with that, but it would also move towards, you know, maybe attracting investment. Like there's huge companies around the world that are doing ESG policies because investors are looking for environmentally sound practices, not procuring from areas that would have been deforested to get that product. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity with that one. And I think we've been developing like a procurement policy for the cities that you're sourcing from sustainable sources, or maybe using wood products and then new builds. I think there's a lot of overlap.
And the reusable products.
Yeah.
Great. Do you have something else?
No, I just.
Mine's not necessarily related, so. Okay, so I think just before we sort of dive in fully, can you help me understand, like, I see a lot of great things. I see some quick wins. Like, can you like dimension some of these out a little bit? I see, you know, there's some recommendations on here that are really, really good, but if planning and engineering don't find to it, then it doesn't necessarily go anywhere. So like, that's why we're going right to the top. So I think that that's a good idea. Like there's certainly some quick wins, and those could possibly be put even into the project category of easy things that we can, you know, try to work together towards accomplishing. But when it comes to the greater submission to council, it is more like what was submitted in the official plan. It's things that we can prioritize. So when you're creating your line items for the budget, you know, we have more adherence to actions that would help reduce our emissions. Travis, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I appreciate where you're coming from. And I think what we've always tried to do is have a solid mix of quick wins with the longer term, you know, practices kind of built in behind, so that you're kind of moving them in concert. So I think incorporating the quick wins into the budget, but then also having placeholders for continual investment for the longer term items. So I think when you're looking at prioritizing, it's important to look at, you know, you've got a 2-year term. Which ones are you going to actually tick off the list, and which ones do you want to advance for, you know, whatever the new board is, or 4-year term? Okay, our tourism one's only 2.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's important to look at a solid mix of those.
Got it. And so we're going to the budget. We have some quick wins. Some items don't cost any money, but it's a political will thing. Yeah. So that goes more of like an action plan thing, or
It's long term. but yeah, they'd be an action thing. That's where we would rely heavily upon the chair. And also our council rep to, leverage some of their political capital to help move those things along.
Okay, thank you.
Emily, I just want to add something if I might. So the purpose of today is just so we put this in context again, is to discuss these and ensure these are all of the ideas that each of you and many of you in our committee, everybody had some ideas, which was great. So these are all the ideas, and Emily has organized them in our levels of responsibility. So the important thing for today is to make sure that you understand what this item means. We're not going to debate the item or anything today necessarily, but we just want to make sure that you see what everyone contributed as a group, number one. Number two, that you understand completely what that means. And then from there, we're going to be able to rank these things and give our opinions on what we think is important. And then from there, then we can see what rises to the top, and then we can, in subsequent meetings, we can really get into the opportunities behind this and the different levels and layers behind it and so on. So keep thinking about that. Make sure you completely understand what that item means. And then, of course, if there's things that come up in your mind and you say, wow, I never thought of this, but I'm thinking about it now because of other things that are there, then if we want to add things that to be considered as priorities, then we would do that as well. Did I capture that properly, Emily?
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. So again, if you see something that comes up that you suggested and you want to clarify, add to it. Okay, so developing a climate change policy. So such as using bylaws and zoning powers to reduce emissions, so requiring electric vehicle charging stations in new or retrofitted buildings, mandating zero emission heating systems, etc. This is really like a policy thing that can really help the corporation with its community emissions. So as there's a lot of building going on in this neighborhood, it's very exciting. But as we build these new buildings, are we taking into consideration climate, right? This is a good idea in that regard.
So what differentiates that from ESG policy would be more of a focus on specifically greenhouse gases?
Sorry, go ahead.
So there's similarities for sure. Environmental social governance, from my understanding, can address a lot of different things. I would say that this, the way it has been submitted, is more specific to mitigation. So,
Sorry, I was going to say this one is also more outward facing, right? It's not just specific to the corporation. We'd be building in policies and requirements for development, outside practices within, local businesses or construction industry, et cetera.
so that's a good point. Because when I look at all of this, and after we bring it, we'll be able, how I showed on my PowerPoint a few minutes ago, there was green space, there was active transportation. We'll be able to kind of come up with some themes that these could fall under. And I'm even thinking internal, external, right? What are some external priorities, and funnel those underneath it. We're not there yet. Right? Does that help?
Yes.
I just want to add, I think the ESG would be a long-term thing, whereas number two would be a short-term as well.
Yeah.
I think the power of number two, again, as an urban planner, this is where you can actually target the planning and the powers that the city has to mandate certain things with zoning. And so I would actually argue it's probably not a short-term thing. But like the optimism. But yeah, I think from development approval processes, you can really start to make change in a meaningful way in terms of binding folks to make these changes.
Is there also data on the difference between electric vehicle use, their construction, how to make them, their manufacture, how to get here.
Like
And
the
then
life cycle,
yeah, and the emissions that takes, as well as the maintenance of the electric system over time. With like hydroelectric and that does to rivers, you know what I mean?
so when was it? I think it was back in 2021. I actually did in building department to all the construction agencies. This was all virtual, so were they all there? I doubt it. About embodied carbon, like opening the door to understanding like the life cycle emissions of your building materials, etc. That piece plus this climate change policy all ties in to an action in the GHG reduction plan, which is develop a green building standard within the municipality, which you actually see a lot of communities doing. It's been very helpful. There's been some changes provincially that have impacted that, but you know, I think that is like sort of an umbrella idea, if you will, that you capture a lot of these initiatives that we could drill into the more detail.
Yeah, because I mean, like, we're gonna have a green building standard, maybe we should look for what we need to put that right now, and like increase the things we need in 50 years. To make the buildings.
Like building materials or like,
Building, yeah, especially for them transition to wood.
and that's also ties into the ESG piece, right? Like we need to incorporate those ways of thinking, not just in the here and now, but like the life cycle. So they're both good, going back to the short and long, like, and having to really elaborate and just we'll get into that in detail. But what I'm taking away from this is we need to have something that could maybe be a bit more immediate and something that could address all of these things in the long term. I will finesse what was discussed today, just to consider this just the third point. Okay. Make climate change action a top priority and city strategic plan update. This is one of those things that is currently being discussed, but it's a big deal. As I said earlier, this type of work takes an all hands on deck approach. And in a municipality, that strategic plan is a big deal.
So this one just made me unsure about the difference between responsibility 3 and 6. It's the third point on responsibility 6.
Yeah, I see that.
Has a lot of overlap, and that just made me try to figure out conceptually what the difference between the two responsibilities is.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure I fully got there.
I think one flows into the other.
Okay. Yeah, so like this number 6 kind of specifically talks about the annual budget. But number 3 is specifically mentioning policy, plans, and practices.
Yeah,
So it's longer term. If you embed it within the corporate strategic plan, then it'll drive. Things need to be in the corporate strategic plan in order to be prioritized in the budget. So they are connected, but you won't necessarily get them in the budget without that plan in place. Or the prioritization within the plan.
Okay, so almost we need to have policies, plans, and practices sketched out first, and then maybe prioritize from that to the annual budget.
I think you need the incorporation within the strategic plan. You don't necessarily need all, like, it being embedded in the strategic plan may lead to more direction of staff to develop these policies and implement them. Okay. It's kind of like everything that we've referred to date in terms of, you know, ESPs, some of the environmental policies. We can develop them at this point, but they're not a pillar in the strategic plan. Whereas if there's a pillar in the strategic plan, then it's like, okay, this is a priority of the municipality. We need to get these in place. And then that'll also trickle down to the budgetary line item. Okay, clear as well.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Emily, maybe what we can do is take this feedback and we might rework. What I'm hearing is that people would like to see perhaps it's just one item that says climate change is important. We prioritize it. We value it. We'll fund it. We, you know, that kind of thing, and wherever that fits in. Because at the end of the day, what gets prioritized gets funded. So we can maybe take that forward as something. We might tweak this a little bit. I don't know, before we resend it out, or we won't. But just as long as everybody understands what they're prioritizing, that's the important thing.
It's a good idea, yeah. We'll send the corporate strategic plan out along with the climate plan, so you can get a sense of, you know, where it is at now. It's currently being taught, so there's an opportunity here to embed climate change in it. And if there was a recommendation from the committee to push that, maybe carry it forward.
Is it possible to like point within this document to where we can specifically see connections between this work and
The plan, corporate plan.
Yeah.
So there currently is a, I don't know if it's a value or something, if there's environmental sustainability is in there right now. But like, you know how it's like what they're refining, like are they refining the values of the corporate strategic plan? Everything.
Yeah.
So the whole thing's up for renewal. So this as a priority, you know,
what's the deadline to move that?
I don't have the deadline. I know it's a project that's currently in progress right
It's-
now.
Just like, it hasn't quite started yet, and it's anticipated to take at least 3 months, and we'll do some community consultation as part of it. I don't want to get into the weeds here, but just further to your point, so really, I think what the broad focus for a lot of these should be is ensuring that GHG reduction and sustainability is a priority in the corporate strategic plan. And I'll link this back to item number 7. So a resolution was passed that city staff should be purchasing for light vehicles, EVs. It's not listed. So when we went through the budgetary processes, some of the city staff disregarded the resolution, and it wasn't necessarily picked up on because it didn't link back to the strategic plan, which is one of the items that was being budgeted against. So further to Donna's point, like you need it prioritized in the plan to ensure that the budget's allocated for that. So I think like, it's shouldn't be a major win, but it would be a major win to have it as one of the priorities. Kind of a no-brainer, but if you can get it in the strategic plan, then I think we've gotten a lot of traction to move a lot of these forward.
Okay, item 4, conduct an annual sustainability audit on the city's budget. So create a baseline of what is being done or budgeted for that has a sustainability or emissions reduction impact. You'll be able to create a baseline and say, okay, this year, this is how much we invested into it. Look at our emissions reduction target, still not on track. Proof, case in point, we need to invest more. So it's an exercise that would, have some numbers, for some numbers and emissions. Yeah. Any elaboration?
Yeah, so I suggested that I kind of in other cities as a useful exercise, and I think the more evidence that we can get to make good decisions and create a picture of where we're at is good. So I think it's often very easy to point to all the things that we do from a sustainability perspective, but then the real answer is in the budget, and it's just a very valuable tool in terms of putting actual numbers to people's words. So,
Or it could be an invincible.
sure. And it's no judgment, right? We start wherever we start, and then at least we have somewhere to work on it for sure.
Kind of like the inventory.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was thinking about like, for example, like fire prevention strategies in buildings. Like, I don't know what's in this building, but I'm sure it has, if there's that big alarm day. And I'm sure it has like a code and it has to meet certain standards. And if it's not in the building, like it's not gonna meet building code, et cetera. But I feel like where are those standards for climate change within the city and you know, if anybody has their house, they can, building code or violation. And then you get fined or whatever. So are we, can we have those implemented?
Yeah.
Those fines and,
I don't know if you can develop fines, but you could, like, that goes back to what I had mentioned about new development standards. So other municipalities have established that, so new builds require, this, homes to be built with an energy efficiency level X amount above the imperial building. Then they're actually being leaders as a municipality when it comes to green development. Right? This is an action in the GHG reduction plan that has not made any progress on a corporate level yet. Here. But I brought it up a lot and I believe I'll be coming up with some language and adding it to this list to push that forward.
as long as it connects to the strategic plan.
Yeah, but the strategic plan could be its own entity as well, because like, if that gets in there, all this other stuff becomes a lot. Right, Travis?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not trying to rush, but these 90 minutes, they go by lickety split. Okay, so next is embed climate target goals into city department head key production indicators. So key production indicators would be like the targets, their goals for the year, tying this back to, like this being an all hands on deck approach. I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that one. Okay. 6, require city staff to have their climate impact statement on council reports reviewed by the sustainability coordinator, similar to finance, reviewing the financial section on all reports. So just for some context, anything that has to be done, a project, etc., has to go to council for approval. I mean, it's how there's a council report, it's sort of like a cover memo about what's being done. Sometimes it needs permission, sometimes it needs money, etc. One of those remedial actions that I identified was the creation of a climate impact statement on the council report template, which is a big deal. You're seeing a lot of municipalities have like a climate lens on projects, etc. So it's a starting point. But there are sections on the council report that must be reviewed by other city staff and municipalities, such as funding. So this would be one that, are we meeting it? Are people actually filling out this section? So that's what.
Is there an incentive program?
An incentive program for staff to complete that.
No, it's kind of, I guess, going back to the 5 in a way.
Yep.
So like we had that snow event, right? And that cost the city X amount of dollars. And as climate change continues to exacerbate, those things are going to increase. And if we can determine the cost of that, let's say 20-year period, then when we're incentivizing people to actually meet these target emissions, which are not, and they're going reverse to what we're proposing, then perhaps the incentive can be financial for meeting certain targets because you're in the long run costing the city less money, or the city budget is decreased because they're.
So I think like you bring forward a sound point, a logical point. One of the actions in the GHG reduction plan, let's say the action, is to create an internal revolving energy fund where we actually have pot of money to establish the fund retrofits, the energy efficiency retrofits that will reduce energy consumption and the climate mitigation. And the energy savings saved from those projects could be reinvested into other energy reduction projects. It's a model that's been used by the community as far as, climate events like causing weather, like, have you know, what have you. We'll have to think about, like, you have thoughts on how that can be financed, like how that can be used for. But the incentive, where would that come from?
It would come from the reduced costs of climate disasters.
Okay, so expanding upon that from not just energy reduction, but saving from,
Yeah, like there have to be like where
yeah,
things like,
Yeah.
you know, calculation done.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, those calculations have been in various places, and we're seeing the increased costs of climate related events. So if we add that as a certain number and you know, is that the goal? Are these the big goals that we have, or are they kind of?
I'd say that's pretty specific. Like, that's a very specific, like, you know, some of these things are, again, like a priority would be, just taking a look would be like, you know, green space. Okay, like that would be, like a theme, and then like, you know, priority would be to plant diverse and non-native, and non-invasive tree species that are more resilient to climate change as well as current and future climate change, right? Like that's a very specific initiative that I'll have to kind of think about and figure out where it could go. But it does tie in to a piece that we really aren't addressing yet at the municipality, which is climate adaptation. A lot of our efforts today have been focused on mitigation, so we're reducing emissions, but that's a big part of it as well.
Well, and another way to look at it might be like, for example, if you create green space, you're gonna bring in a diverse habitat for, say, a certain bird species.
Yeah.
You know, you get a reward for that.
Right.
And that would be, I think people would, most like if I knew I was gonna bring in some, I've seen some Bohemian waxwings in my backyard, they're beautiful bird, never seen it before. And like, wow, I didn't know those were here. I never even see it here. I didn't know it existed. It's a really cool bird.
Yeah.
I was gonna create habitat for that specific species. Like that's, I mean, as a business, that goal, like now you have that in your backyard. It seems like more achievable or more like rewardable than reducing and being targeted and, you know, these kind of heavy words.
Yeah.
Emily, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm concerned that there's all these awesome ideas that people are discussing, and I think we maybe need to, you know, Travis weigh in on this and whoever else, but like we're at 5 o'clock and we're not through the first column yet. So perhaps we have to take a different look at this if we want to have more time available to like dig a little bit more into some of these things so people can have a deeper understanding or be thinking about the opportunities behind them. We might have to stretch this out over more than one meeting before we can actually prioritize. I'd be looking for your guidance there, Emily and Travis, what you're thinking.
I have a thought. So you're right, we're not going to get through this today. We could get, you know, we could provide a little bit more in terms of the notes on the side, send it out to the groups or to the team, have them rank the items, aggregate it. I know you're going to do this anyways. Aggregate it, bring the ranking to the next meeting, and just say, you know, we're going to do the top 3 out of each category, and we could have a more wholesome discussion. Or something like, it doesn't have to be the top 3, but I think you could spend like 5 meetings, Donna, walking through these. So, you know, it might be worthwhile doing it that way.
Yeah.
And then I think, probably looking at short-term, medium-term impact within the municipality, impact within the community. And I do think the committee should consider tangible projects. I think it's important to have projects that are visible within the community so that the community at large understands the value of this committee. Because if you're constantly like the policies and procedures and everything else is incredibly important, probably more impactful over the long term. But if you have some projects that are visible within the community, it gives credibility to this group, because nobody external to this committee or city hall is going to see a policy or, to be perfectly honest, care about it. So I think that you might want to consider some of those projects as well. Anyways, that's my 2 cents.
They're 2 cents. So what I'm gonna suggest is, like, you all have had, like, just a shut eye and we go through this. Like, none of this is overtly new, and you'll have time to review in more detail. Is there anything, as opposed to going through step one by one, no overview? Is there anything that comes to mind right now? Maybe we'll go around. We'll start with anyone who has things to say. In addition, that we will use to add to this. So again, look at it real simple. A priority that the city should focus on, a visible project in the community that could, and I'll give you an example of one that we did last year that was really impactful. And it was the committee prioritized stormwater art project. And we worked with the city's manager of recreation and culture, and she worked with youth to go around and catch basins with artwork and messages regarding rainwater only, bring awareness to stormwater pollution. This is a project that was visible, there was left behind artwork. Did it help reduce emissions? No, but again, it was something that was brought forward in the community. That was only 50% complete. We're going to be finishing that up this year, tying it in with a youth initiative for the Trout Unlimited Canada. But that's the kind of stuff that would be visible in the community. So again, let's look at this. You all have time to go over this in more detail. If you want to call me one-on-one, go over stuff you can. Why don't we go around, see if anybody has anything they want to focus on? Maybe it's something that's already been submitted, a project or a priority. How's that?
Yeah, I would hesitate, just being perfectly honest, just in terms of, like, I think if you have a recommendation, keep it really high level. Otherwise,
We'll be here all day.
you'll be here all day. So, I mean, the other recommendation is, you got one more chance to go through this list. The ability to email 2 more action items, or, 1 action item for each additional one. But you can have just a high level conversation, but if you're trying to keep it to 5:30, you're going to want to keep it fairly concise.
Well, we're not going to go through it all again. So we got about 25 minutes left. I think there's time to keep it short, 3 minutes, maybe. We should have time for everybody to say the final piece, and we'll get it in there. I like this idea about short-term, medium-term impact at cities, impact in the community, and also visible projects. So I will take that feedback and finesse what I've submitted to you all today as well. So anybody want to take the first? Anything else, ideas, let's go for it.
I go first. Okay. When we talk about the ESG and development policy, one thing that's priority for me and I would like to see is that the consideration of doing less be part of it. Basically, anything you do creates greenhouse gas emissions. People have expectations of the corporation to continue to do the same thing they always did, plus more. But are there things that can be scaled back? A, that there's no cost to it, and B, you can get instant emissions reduction. So like cutting less grass, that sort of thing. So doing less, are all of the things that the city does necessary and are they valuable? Or are they an area where emissions can? I just want that to be a consideration when developing like an ESG road.
Yeah. Thanks, Gordon.
Thanks.
Anything else to add?
That's my main thing.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Myers?
So I'm just thinking of like visible, so would an announceable of something like the city's doing this, would that be like the visible thing as well? Like, is that of interest, I guess?
Yeah.
So if there's a group of activities, even if they're like policies that, may not people may not read them, but at least they know our city is moving towards blah, blah, blah. That would be something. And then, the other thing that I thought was a quick, short-term possible win was, number 8 under the green one. Because our province has, they're updating their forest resources inventory to use LiDAR. And, what they do with municipal land is they just like block it out. So that information is there. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to, like getting somebody with a GIS background to do that analysis. I even have the wording, like the script that you would run. I don't know how to run it.
So it's being included in the LiDAR.
Yeah, it is being included, but they just block it out because, the LiDARs for the crown forests or crown.
Cool.
That's all I have.
Eric,
I don't think I have anything to add. My main thing was to clarify those 2 responsibilities, which we've already talked about. There's a lot of good ideas here. To add the LiDAR based tree cover. There's a lot of forestry talent in the city that can do that quite easily.
any projects or initiatives that we submitted that you wanna, not submitted, but brought forward, you wanna move forward? Back to back. Or good?
I think everything is, there's a lot of good ideas captured here.
It's
I
hard.
don't think we need to
Yeah,
add more.
great. Art,
So I think we had a long discussion about this already on our one-on-one. I'm advocating for more policy, to get into detail more of that. Dealing from the city end of things, I think we can talk about it, or there could be resolutions created. But unless there's policy behind that and we push that into policy, then, it's just going to be a lot of talk. So we talk about medium and long-term specific goals. I think that's some of the things that we need to be focusing on policy and how to enact and enable that policy so that it becomes part of the regular city day-to-day activities or things that they're doing, is you're starting to see some of that policy. I think we work on a lot of short-term projects already that, I think that are coming to fruition, but I would like to see more of the medium to long-term policies and building codes adjustments and things like that, so that we can not only affect just the city municipal stuff, but also the city as a greater whole, for how things are done.
for example, like you mentioned building codes, but is there something else maybe that?
So there's a lot of things I think out there. I'm not a building code expert, but I think there's a lot of things out there that you can start enabling and acting. A lot of the stuff I think that Andre sent out for reading, I've read and made a ton of sense in terms of, how we enable communities to be densify communities or even allow multi-use of different neighborhoods and things like that. I think that one of the bigger examples is you don't see the corner stores anymore. You're traveling or driving to get to some, like a bag of milk. You're driving to get that. So starting to help or starting to enable some of those policies to allow things like that and building code to allow things like that from the medium to long term, I think is a good strategy.
So does that fit under developing a climate change policy using bylaws? It doesn't specifically mention building codes, but I think
No.
it's kind of wide there.
Yeah, I think it kind of fits under a bunch of these different categories. I think I would say like there's a lot of overlap between a lot of these, I think that can be.
It's almost like the 15-minute city principle.
Right.
Right? When you start looking at those pieces.
I have a quick question. How does the city do policy transfer? Because just from like what you had said about, some staff hadn't implemented certain things that were agreed upon, is that an area too to strengthen the policy or the policy transfer?
Policy transfer
Meaning we have this policy, how do you get everyone to know what to do?
I think like for bigger policies. And correct me, just going back to some of the bigger like corporate wide ones, like it's been sent out and you have to sign off on, it, right? Like big
Yeah.
ones. So like when I say sign off, everybody, like all of staff and
like checking the box, yeah, it's done, but then forget, like, are there information sessions, if people know like what this means for them, or?
I think that would be good. Yes, it turns, I would say, but it's a good idea to have that session like that. Feel free to.
Doesn't that happen everywhere? We just, yeah, we read it.
So with the ministry, with M&R, there's always information sessions and maybe with all the stakeholders, indigenous communities, or everyone under the sun. Everyone within the ministry, like, so when I did this new transfer policy, there were 5 webinars to support that policy implementation. So we talked to, and then we would talk in perspective of, this is what you need to know as stakeholders, this is what you need to know internally to government. Yeah.
So I apologize, I've got childcare. I got duty. See you guys.
Okay, thank you.
So like, I guess I look at these from a different perspective, maybe. And this one, like a holistic perspective, like I teach courses on climate change, so, you know, like, it's a big problem. So it's like, why are we have to change a policy, like, why is everybody doing immediately? So maybe there's a need to like educate people. Like, I just wrote a paper for the federal government on climate change communications. And one of the feedback from the communities interviewed that this paper was on was almost like something that's anxiety provoking for them. Like, this was the scientists at the POC were interviewed and asked. I haven't eaten since like breakfast, so like I'm also like I need food.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was in the sugar bush all day, so and it's hard for me to fully think, but like I think we need a climate change communication strategy to let people know what's really going on.
That was a common theme that came up in a lot of this. Like, how are we, how are we communicating?
I can like get it out as soon as possible to like every home and everybody's, like I get that there's gonna be people who can't respond to climate change, but I think that the people in this room are all in a privileged position that we probably can. And so like we might need like a tiered response strategy.
Yeah.
If you're in this position, you need to do this, and if you're in this position, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
But certainly like, debating about building codes and these kinds of things. I don't know, from my point of view, it's like, do we really realize what's going on, Like,
Yeah.
it's a massive problem.
Like, so the urgent.
It's urgent.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to counter that, I think sometimes so where it gets lost is when it becomes an urgent problem, because then it polarizes people. And then you actually have people like, I can't do anything, this is just too big of a problem. And so I like the idea of a communication strategy. That's a great idea. And it seems like it's more of the adaptation side of things, like here's what we're doing, how we're trying to do it. But I'd be careful with the language, because sometimes from my own experience, to the M&R trying to get any sort of climate change action and using polarizing language was nobody did anything.
Yeah.
Until it was more.
Yes. Just gonna interrupt 1 second. Donna, I know you're on the phone. Mark can take over as chair if you need to run. I don't know if you.
Actually, that would be awesome. Thank you, Mark. I am going to still keep listening because I can listen. I do apologize. I have another thing all happening today. But I'm listening and I'm still here. So I'll be here till we're done.
Mark, you're acting chair. All right.
I'm just saying, somebody should have asked Mark.
I know. Okay, so Andrew, good point. happy to clarify some with you. Is there anything else just to get very important?
Yeah, no, specific holistic ones, things that are holistic.
Okay.
Can I just clarify, are you basically saying we could add another item, like the red column that says we should really collectively work on the communication strategy? Because there are like, there's a couple like specific things like information session and a webinar, outreach events, but you're saying at a higher level, we should collectively prioritize creating a communication strategy.
That, yes, yeah, and like a holistic. I hear what you're saying, for sure, and I know that it can be anxiety provoking, but there's ways to frame it, I think. I have like, I'm like, it's urgent, like, let's go, like, let's plant trees, like, but yeah, we have to manage everything first.
Andre.
Yeah, I've got two here that are kind of related, and I brought some drafts, I thought, so I sent Emily an email, I just thought I would read it, probably makes it clear. The first, I think, thing that the city needs to do is what Tobin was referring to, is put a moratorium on road expansion. So I'm gonna read this, if you don't mind. Sometimes these factors require a big picture view. A dramatic shift in thinking is required if we're going to meet our climate targets. The main generator of emissions in this city is transportation, both on a personal and corporate level. This is very much caused by how we have quote, grown in the last 50 years despite a static or a drop in population. The thinking at City Hall with developers and the general population is based on myths and a total lack of knowledge of how resilient cities work. I've heard comments from engineering directors, multiple engineering consultants, and our former planning director that reaffirm that these people of influence simply don't get it. Chief among them is, we give people choice, we provide what they want. This is so contrary to all the evidence that choice and what people want is very much dictated by how our city is built and developed. Developers would always decide on what makes them the most money, and buying cheap land on the edge of town and building subdivisions, big box stores, schools, and hospitals is the current status. The problem with that model is twofold. One is the cost of maintaining this infrastructure is not covered by the revenues generated by these developments in the long term, particularly if you factor in the environmental costs, air pollution, and greenhouse gases caused by all the new driving, the storm sewer runoff, and the carnage caused by car crashes among other things. Yet, so given the fact that people choose by cost and convenience, if the true cost of these choices are not factored in, the best choice will always be sprawl. So there's a graph here that I think we should look at this company. The company is called Urban 3. What this graph does, it takes every acre of a city, and on the up side is how much revenue that acre makes in taxes and collecting for the city. And on the bottom is how much that acre costs the city. So what Urban 3 does, and they have cities that now require what they call an impact analysis on the cost to the city, the resiliency, not just the impact to the environment, but basically how much it costs. So what you tend to see is that new subdivision costs the city money. They don't generate revenue, but there's a myth that people think that new subdivisions is good because it's got more taxpayers, but actually that new subdivision is a liability to the city in the long term. So that's why these graphs are very useful, because they actually are very clear that that's a myth that has to be abandoned right off the bat. And also the other thing that you see here is that the downtowns are actually where the revenue is generated, and that strip malls and big box buildings actually cost the city money, especially when you consider the amount of traffic they generate and also kill the small business. So that's why I put the moratorium as a clear one. Okay, so Urban 3 graph put that in perspective. So Suzanne really is blessed and cursed by ample space and cheap land. So we have been spreading out as those costs have been externalized, and we now have to pay up with a screwed up climate and inability to maintain all the infrastructure we built over the last 50 years. This has to change, or we're doomed to continue on this path to insolvency and planetary suicide. Changing the rules and factoring in actual costs will change the incentives and give people realistic choices. The embedded subsidies to auto mobility must be reversed, including a moratorium on road expansion and the externalization of the cost of parking by separating parking from buildings. Okay, so that's what we're doing in, the parking reforms is a step in that. And this is just a quick little graph too that kind of does that. So this is a picture of our downtown. And what it shows is that this was done by somebody in the parking reform network. So downtown Sault Ste. Marie,
You're about another minute on.
Okay. All right, well,
You're doing great. You are.
want me to keep going?
You got about a minute. Like, that's
Okay,
it.
so this was, it calculates how much parking is dedicated at the surface area. So, Sault Ste. Marie, this is, represents 40% of the land in the downtown core dedicated to off-street parking. Now, if you add, the street themselves and the on-street parking, you add another 25%. So basically, 65% of our land downtown is pavement for cars. So this graph here is basically ranking the cities, 50 cities across the states on how much parking they have relative to the space. And also they adjust for the population of those cities. And then you see that on the top, so the cities that have the highest density, basically they become the cheapest they produce the less carbon emissions per capita. So the top 5 cities would be like San Francisco, Washington, New York, Boston, Oakland. On the bottom, you have Arlington, Las Vegas, Detroit, Lubbock. So basically these cities have, a high percentage. Now, I would.
So Andre, what are your?
Yeah, and the last one thing, so where's Sault Ste. Marie, we're like the second from last. So what I'm saying is that with the parking reform, we're gonna move in that direction. And then the other two things is one is moratorium on road expansion. So when they want to do a study to expand to deal with congestion, it's ridiculous because congestion is the solution to congestion. So if people decide to drive because it's the easiest thing to do. So when you get a bit of congestion, what they do in big cities, if there's too much traffic on a road, they just take the road away. So then there's no problem. There's no more congestion because there's no more traffic. Over here, we make more roads. So what happened, it makes it easier to drive and more people drive. So when I went to the Great Northern Road study and the consultant said, I said, well, how do you account for,
Sorry, you, with your actions, like I told you,
Yeah.
in here, so they're in here. So again, we'll prior, redo this so it's clearer for everybody. Tori, over to you. Sorry, Andre.
So super quick, I think just some overall thoughts. Mark, I'm more on your wavelength with the policy and the long-term piece of things. I think corporate structure is not necessarily like an exciting thing to talk about, but it's really important. And so, to Andre's point and all of this conversation around how inextricably linked sustainability is with the built environment, I think I would love to see the sustainability capacity of the organization of Sault Ste. Marie align more with planning and engineering, instead of, I think it's great that we can go right to council for the budget asks, but I worry that when initiatives are introduced in a forum that is sort of not an appendage, but if you can understand what that means, it's not necessarily ingrained and institutionalized in the organization. And so my hope would be, I think, as a planner, I'm biased, but we should be able to harness resources and align, philosophically on the built environment elements of these things. And so that's sort of in relation to that, I think it's really important for the city of Sault Ste. Marie to actually, have a position that is manager of sustainability. I think, if you think about what does the city prioritize, okay, we prioritize economic development. So what if we had no economic development department? Does that mean we really prioritize economic development? Similarly with sustainability, I think, we have a coordinator, our wonderful coordinator here, but I think coordinator would be so much more empowered to make action, make decisions as a manager. and really be a leader in this space, if, you know, if the appropriate corporate structure existed. So, I'll leave it at that for now.
Anything else to add?
No, great conversation
Are there items on here that you think achieve that,
that would achieve.
that are actually working towards changing
The built environment
Yeah.
stuff? Yeah, so it's tricky. So I mean, full disclosure, I did work for the city for 2.5, 3 years a while ago. And I think like Mark, to your point about policy and the corner store being gone, like we have all of those policies. Like we wrote a strategy on the downtown revitalization and all of those policies exist. And yet, to your point, Nairi, like the policy transfer of, yes, we support downtown intensification, but we're gonna move the hospital to Great Northern Road. But we're gonna move St. Mary's College to Great Northern Road, right? And so we have to, like, that's the root of it, right? Otherwise, you know, having those difficult conversations about, you honestly can't have both, like, it's a city of 75,000 people. If you want people at the hospital or you want people downtown, it's challenging, right? And so the corner store piece as well, like, they're just, sorry, I don't wanna, I'll get off my soapbox, but there is so much opportunity from a planning policy perspective, and it's just like having champions to make it happen. And so anyway,
I wonder if there is even, so if there, first, it's like the awareness of the policy exists. The second, you're gonna vary from that policy, where do you
Mhm.
rationalize that decision? How is that for the better of the community? Where do we put that in our
Yeah,
city council?
and like that ties into the climate impact statement on a council board, because like that is where everything goes, like everything goes to city council. Why are certain things avoided? Well, you know, so I think today, one thing we've accomplished is just more understanding of how things work here. And it's a learning curve for sure, right? Like there's this strategic plan and then there's these council reports and all of that. So I think this has been, you know, a very useful conversation. There's never enough time. Few closing points. One is, I commit to the committee to listen to what you said and to finesse what was submitted. I, you know, so many ideas, it was hard to try to break it down, but I'll make it clear. I'll try to look at what we discussed today and what was submitted, kind of break it more into specifics. Okay. So thank you for your feedback. Again, learning process on my part. This is not the end. There will be more opportunities to finesse those. I am going to share with you all an article from Municipal World. It's a Canadian municipal magazine. And there are 5, the article is actually written about how municipalities can go from planning to implementation for climate action. And it focuses on 5 priorities. So with 5 ways we can support climate community efforts. It's really well done. Actually, some of the actions tie into the city's climate plan. So I guess my closing remarks will be, we'll communicate via email. We will meet again in May. But what can we do to make more movement on this portfolio at the corporate level? That's the key takeaway. So with that, thank you for your feedback. As always, never enough time. Mark, as our chair, I'll turn it over to you to adjourn our meeting. There is a staff update in your agenda package. If you want to know what I've been up to the past month, take a look at it. Our next meeting is May 9th, or actually it's May 2nd. So my apologies, it's May 2nd. Mark, and I need a motion to adjourn.
Yep, so I guess that's it for everybody, and so I will need a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting today. So Andre and Nairi, so Andre's the mover and Nairi's the seconder, or we could switch it around if you really want. I don't think anyone's cares either way, but that's the way we'll go, so. All in favor?